Thank you very much, Julie. Hello to everyone. I see a few familiar faces, so I'm happy to see some of you again and meet some of you, so to speak, now. So I want to start by saying that some of you who were on a learning experience with me a few months ago know that my father passed away in August, and I like to dedicate, learn as I can. My father's Hebrew name was Baruch Yaakov, is Baruch Yaakov, Ben Meir Vepesel. So, and I somewhat ironically, we're going to talk about Jacob today and Jacob's death and blessing, and it's really, I don't know, it's uncanny to me. You know, my father's name was, his middle Hebrew name was Jacob, and his first name in Hebrew was blessed, Jacob, who is blessed. So we'll see, it will become very relevant. So thank you for sharing in that experience with me today. So there's a lot that I want to explore with you today, and I don't know how we're going to get it all done, but we're going to try. There are two major themes that I wanted to look at with you. And the first thing that we're going to do is I'll introduce the end of Genesis a little bit. We'll read some text together, and by some text, I mean a lot of text. We're going to read a lot of text today. It's going to be so hard to make some cuts because there's so many beautiful verses, and we'll do the best we can. And I'll pause as much as I can for questions. I'll be sharing my screen. I hope that we can get to a few medieval classical commentators to help us enhance our reading of the text. And I know Julie posted or sent you the documents, but you'll see I have a couple of visual aids, and we'll talk about a few essential themes today in the book of Genesis. So I'm actually going to start out, I think, by sharing, let me see here, by sharing at a glance. We're not going to spend too much time, but I actually want to start with a big picture of Genesis. So the document that I'm going on to now is called, let's see here, let me make this a little bit bigger. You should, and I have to adjust my screen so I can see you all. So can people give me a thumbs up if they see my diagram here, my stick figures? Okay, great. So I have this up to help us all visualize what happens in the Torah portion, but we're not going to start here. I'm actually, I want to start here. I'm going to make my screen, everybody can see I'm looking up a little bit. My second screen is kind of behind me, so not looking directly at you sometimes. I want to start by thinking about the biggest possible picture in the book of Genesis, and at a glance, you can see that I wrote here reversal of fortune, death, and expecting the unexpected. The experience of leaving this world, the death experience, is what I want to look at today, and the experience that we read about as a paradigmatic leaving this world experience and blessing one's children. And also, I want us to have in mind, because it is constant, this theme of a reversal of fortune or expecting the unexpected. And in particular, in the book of Genesis, we see that time and time again with the reversal of what's called primogeniture, which speaks to, in the ancient Near East, and I mean beyond, it was typical and expected for the oldest child, and let's speak about the ancient Near East very specifically for a moment, the oldest male child to inherit the father's property and household when the father died. And so that reversal of primogeniture happens time and time again. And I think we reach a climax of that in this week's Torah portion at the end of Genesis. So I want to take a brief look with you and plant some seeds. You don't have to read it all or memorize it all right now. You have this document for reference. Isaac supplants the primogeniture of Yishmael, who's really Abraham's firstborn. I'm talking about the second generation here of forefathers. And this happens even with women in the Bible. Rachel, the younger child, triumphs over Leah in their marriages with Jacob. She's the favored one, and we're not going to get into. I've taught on women in Tanakh before, and I like to do feminist readings all the time, but we're going to put that on hold for a moment. And one of the most significant reversals of primogeniture is that Judah, who's the fourth son of Jacob and Leah, he is the namesake of the tribe that becomes most dominant. We're Jews, we're descended from Judahites or Judeans, and Judah is our namesake. The northern kingdom of Israel is destroyed before the southern kingdom of Judah. And if you have questions about that, I will try and get to them. But just to keep in mind, the fourth son, the middle of all 12 sons, is what becomes one of the leaders. And Joseph, of course, as we've been reading about in the book of Genesis, the second to youngest son, certainly is a favored. And there's a certain fatalism about his experience. No matter what bad things happen to him, he seems to triumph over them. And today we're going to read about his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And you'll see here that Ephraim is spelled in multiple ways. I'm not a consistent transliteration speller. Sometimes I spell things one way, sometimes I spell things another way. So,
Abby,
yes.
Well, we'll forgive you for the transliteration inconsistency. I actually, sorry to interrupt. Would you be able to make this sheet is currently at 75%?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I wanted, of course. Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. I wanted to try and give people the fullest picture possible. You can do that on your own computer. So yes, we're going to read today about Joseph's sons really becoming Jacob's sons, and how the younger son supplants the older son, the younger grandson supplants the role of the older grandson and becomes the most powerful, in the end, the most powerful northern tribe. So I've just said a ton, but even if you didn't catch all the details, I promise it really doesn't matter at this moment. You can always read these stories in Genesis and really see them for yourself. But I wanted you to have this big picture in mind of a reversal of the expected. So even before we dive into the text, I can't believe it's already 10:40. I want to pause. I know I'm talking a little bit quickly, and take one or two questions or reflections just about laying the groundwork here for our text study today. So I'm going to pause and see if one or two people want to ask a question or share a reflection as we make our way to the text itself.
And feel free to put chat or the raise hand function. If there's a waving hand, Abby, I don't, and you see it, can you let me know who?
Yes, I see Esther Westelman, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
Okay, go ahead and unmute. There you go.
I find that in today's parasha, the first 4 children, Jacob doesn't really bless them. He reprimands them. It's only when it comes to Judah and further that it comes to blessing. And I think Judah was chosen for 2 very important reasons. First of all, he did tshuva. And second, he saved 2 people. He saved Joseph and he saved Tamar. And so you see the leadership there.
I would argue that Tamar saved Judah, but that's for another time. But Esther, thank you. So Esther just gave us the opportunity to dive a little further into our text. And I know I said 1 or 2 questions, so I will take another question or reflection, but I do want to share a different screen with you and respond to Esther doing that. So bear with me as I share. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right thing here. Okay, I think I am. Okay, so you should see a Safaria link right now. Great, thanks, Julie. So I'm going to make this wider for myself. So Esther noted that Parashat Vayechi is multiple chapters. And Esther, I know you didn't say this exactly, but Esther spoke specifically about Genesis 49, which is when Jacob blesses his sons. We are going to, so thank you, Esther, for mentioning that, because I hope you all read that on your own. It is actually considered one of the oldest poems, texts in the Hebrew Bible. It's very difficult. Some modern literary scholarship likes to express that we actually don't know what a lot of the verses mean. We are going to focus today very specifically on Genesis 48 and Jacob's interaction with Joseph in particular. And I want to acknowledge what Esther said about Judah also for another time, or I suggest you look up the story of Judah and Tamar. It's one of my favorite stories in the Hebrew Bible, where Judah does do tshuva, as Esther said. He does undergo a pretty significant character transformation, and subsequent to that, he does take on more of a leadership role. So Esther, thank you for bringing that in. And I did say I would take one more reflection or question. So I'd like to do that. And then we're going to dive right in to the text and our major themes for today.
So Mark has a hand up. Go ahead, Mark.
Yes, Rabbi Eisenberg. Should we also consider Joseph Campbell's model for the hero's journey? I mean, leaving home, meeting a divine character, and then having all the misfortunes, and then rising above it. And then finally, in the end, you return again to the family comes back together.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't read Joseph Campbell in a long time, but I appreciate your bringing that in. 100%. I mean, I think you answered your own question that of course we can see things through that frame. And I appreciate your bringing that to the group also. That's a beautiful, the journey of a family member, the journey of an individual who goes through trials and tribulations. And then in the end, there is some kind of peace. So, we can certainly debate a little bit about how things ended up, but nevertheless, Mark, thank you for bringing in that frame. And I hope that's interesting to me and enriches my own learning of the end of Genesis. And I hope it does the same for other people. So what we're going to do right now is do some text reading. And this is where it gets complicated because the verses they're really incredible verses here that I hate to skip, but we're going to have to skip some of them. So I'm going to ask for a reader. I'm going to ask for, and I'll give you some guidance. So be sure you listen for my guidance of what to read. But I would like someone who hasn't yet shared, and only 2 of you have. So would someone like to volunteer to read in English? And I'll give you some guidance about. Maya, are you raising your hand to read? I know you've read before when I've.
I am.
Okay, wonderful. So we are going to read. We're not going to summarize. We're going to read verses 28 to 31, and then Maya, I'll ask you to pause, and I'll make a few comments, and then I'll ask you to continue and give you some guidance then. Great. So 28 to 31 is where we're starting.
Jacob lived 17 years in the land of Egypt, so that the span of Jacob's life came to 147 years. And when the time approached for Israel to die, he summoned his son Joseph and said to him, "Do me this favor. Place your hand under my thigh as a pledge of your steadfast loyalty. Please do not bury me in Egypt. When I lie down with my fathers, take me up from Egypt and bury me in their burial place." He replied, "I will do as you have spoken." And he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed at the head of the bed.
Great, Bimaya, thank you so much. This lays the groundwork for the rest of our Torah portion. This is the beginning of Jacob's deathbed experience, and he insists on being buried in the land of Canaan, the land that has been promised to his descendants. And I want to comment here that, you know, for those of us that have experienced a loved one passing, you know, I'm sure some of us have experienced a loved one being able to impart his or her or their wisdom onto us. That's not always the case directly, but I would say paradigmatically, this is the beginning of a model of what a death experience should be like, where a loved one, one of our loved ones, does get to begin to pass on their wisdom, which of course doesn't always happen directly, but it's certainly the ideal. So let's keep going and see what happens. We're going to read 1 through 7. We're going to skip my, oh, actually, I'm on. I deleted those for you all. I'm just switching. Yeah, it's basically the same doc, so no worries. Okay, so Bimaya, we're going to read through. Bear with me for a moment. Okay, we're going to read all the way through verse 14, and I may interject in the middle if you don't mind too much. So thank you, Bimaya.
Sometime afterward, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to see you," Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, "El Shaddai appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me. And he said to me, I will make you fertile and numerous, making of you a community of peoples, and I will assign this land to your offspring to come for an everlasting possession. Now, your 2 sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, shall be mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, no less than Reuben and Simeon."
Okay, Bimaya, I want to interject something here. So thank you for allowing me to join you here in this reading out loud. I wanted to share with everyone something very interesting here, which is, and make clear that here we are, the scene is Jacob's deathbed. Jacob does say El Shaddai, which literally means the God of mountains. This is considered an older name for God before Yud He Vav He, before Yahweh. And it's a name that often, not all the time, but often gets used in the context of our patriarchs and promises to our patriarchs. Not all the time, other names are used, but it is considered an older name and used in the context of the patriarchs. And I wanted to mention a couple of other things. I mentioned, we started talking earlier about all of Jacob's sons. I want to point out, I'll make this big for a moment. So just so you have in front of you, these are the 13, I know we've been talking about 12, the 13 children of Jacob, divided up by their mother. Reuven and Shimon, Reuben and Simeon are the oldest. And you can see here that Dinah is the only girl. And let me see here, bear with me for one moment. Yeah, I wanted to show you this so that people are clear on the tribes. There are actually different tribal listings in the Hebrew Bible. This is the one from Joshua, and this is the one from Genesis. The one on the left is from Genesis. So that people are often, and it is quite confusing, many of us can get confused over, well, how do the 13 children become 12 tribes? And part of that is about what we're about to see. But one piece here to keep in mind is that Levi, the third child, does not get a portion allotment because he and his descendants represent the Levites who serve in the temple, and they don't get land. Their portion is considered the temple. Dinah is the only girl, and as such, she does not get a portion, which is, of course, disturbing to many of us as modern readers, but nevertheless, that's the ancient Near East. And what we'll see that what happens here is that Joseph actually gets a double portion in his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. So I wanted people to have this in front of them. I'm not going to pause now for questions, but keep this in mind if you do have questions, and we can certainly come back to it. And as Esther pointed out earlier, I think Esther may have said, if not, I'm going to say directly now, that Reuven and Shimon are chastised, Esther did say this, are chastised, and so are a couple of the other sons by Jacob multiple times in the Torah. They are considered having wronged. These two oldest are considered to have actions that have wronged Jacob and the family, and we'll see Judah and Joseph and others become leaders of the tribal family. So let's keep going with verse 6, I believe, and I will pause for questions soon.
Okay. But progeny born to you after them shall be yours. By their brothers' names let them be called, respecting their inheritance. I do this because when I was returning from Paddan, Rachel died to my sorrow while I was journeying in the land of Canaan. When still some distance short of Ephrath, I buried her there on the road to Ephrath, now Bethlehem. Noticing Joseph's sons, Israel asked, "Who are these?" And Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons, whom God has given me here. Bring them up to me," he said. So I'll need you to scroll up a bit.
Yeah, sorry about that.
"Bring them up to me," he said, "that I may bless them." Now Israel's eyes were dim with age. He could not see. So Joseph brought them close to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see you again. And here God has let me see your children as well." Joseph then took them from his knees and bowed low, their brows to the ground.
Okay, Bimai, we're going to pause here for one moment. This is a lot of information here, I know, so I want to kind of summarize. Jacob says to Joseph in verse 6, if you have more children, right now we're focused on Ephraim and Manasseh, if you have more children, they're your own children, and any inheritance they have will be folded into the tribes that already exist, into Ephraim and Manasseh. But Ephraim and Manasseh themselves, those are going to become my children in the same way that Reuven and Shimon and you, Joseph, are my children. They are now considered my sons. And there are other places in the Hebrew Bible where a relative kind of adopts someone else's children, a family relation. And this is one of those significant cases. And Jacob explains, listen, Joseph, Rachel was my favorite. Your mother was my favorite. And therefore, and she died early. And so I'm expanding her children into not just you and Benjamin, but also Manasseh and Ephraim. Your sons now become Rachel's and my children also. This section here, verse 8, is a little bit confusing. And modern scholars believe there are a couple of authors here folded into one story. And so it seems like Jacob already knew perfectly well all the people that were in front of him. But in fact, this verse indicates otherwise. What I want to suggest here is, as again, I'm going to tie this to the death experience. As we know, sometimes our loved ones, as they die, they even if they didn't already, they lose cognition, and they're not always aware of what's happening around them. And to me, this verse speaks to that. I may be reading in, I may be drashing, as we like to say in traditional language, but I think this is actually a beautiful, perhaps observation on what happens as someone is, whether it's days or hours, as someone is moving along in the death process and the death experience, they often, not all the time, of course, they often lose an awareness, a clear awareness of what's going on. And Joseph generously and kindly explains to his father, well, these are my sons. And Jacob says, well, bring them forward to me. And then we get this beautiful emotional language. Oops, let me fix that. I never expected to see you again, and now I get to see your children also. And then Joseph takes the children from his own possession. And now we're going to read the climactic verses where the switch of Ephraim and Manasseh happened. And again, I know this is a lot, and I'm going to take questions shortly, but I want to reshare my screen in a different way so that you're looking at two things at one time. So bear with me once again. Okay, so this is when we get to look at my stick figure drawing. I know we're not quite there yet, but bear with me for a second, and be Maya especially, thanks for your patience and flexibility. Okay, here I go. I'm sharing my desktop this time. Oh, I don't know. Okay, I actually don't know if I have the ability to share my desktop. I don't see that I can do that.
I can probably share
do you know?
You want me to share it?
The desktop, Julie?
The stick figures.
Yeah, I just wanted to be able to people to be able to see side by side the stick figures with, but it's not necessary.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna go back, and if you'd like, you can take a look. Not everybody needs a visual aid, but it may be helpful to some. So if you'd like, you can have the stick figure drawing in front of you, or you can use your imagination if that works for you. And B. Maya is going to help us finish the section with verses 13 and 14, and then we're really going to pause and analyze together. So B. Maya, go ahead, and thank you again for verses 13 and 14.
Joseph took the two of them, Ephraim with his right hand to Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand to Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn.
Okay, Bimaya, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for reading a lot of text together today. What I want to summarize just those verses. If we imagine, I think it's easiest to do it this way, but if we imagine that we're Joseph and we're bringing our children with the younger on our right and the older on our left, so that when we present them to our father who's about to bless them, the father can easily bless the oldest one on the right, which is traditional, and the youngest one on the left. And in fact, as we can see, what Jacob does is he reverses order. He makes sure that the younger one is blessed with his right hand, which is considered the more prominent or the more godly or more significant hand. And the left is, Jacob reaches out his left hand for Manasseh to give him, to kind of reverse the order of birth here and make him receive the youngest blessing. And the text goes on to where Joseph questions his father and says, do you know what you're doing? And Jacob says, in fact, I do know what I'm doing. And we may look at some commentaries in a moment where we can see there's this debate. Do each of them actually really are they fully aware of what they're doing? And is Jacob himself fully aware of what's going on? And there's a machloket. There's a little bit of a debate. Does Jacob know? Is his mind fully there when he reverses this order and allows the younger child, Ephraim, to take on the oldest role? And one commentator says, absolutely, he knows what he's doing. And another commentator says, actually, his hands kind of magically did the work and his mind wasn't fully there. building off of the verse that says, well, actually, he didn't even know who the sons were initially. So what I want to share with you at the end of this, I'm going to switch screens here for a moment. You can see here, going back to where we began, that what we seem to have here is a theme that's continued throughout the book of Genesis, and we end on this note where not only does one son, the younger son, supplant the role of the older son time and time again, with Isaac supplanting Ishmael, with Jacob supplanting Esau, with Joseph supplanting his older brothers. Now it's Joseph's sons, the grandsons, that even supplant, that replace Joseph's role himself as the favorite, as the younger favorite, but even the grandsons themselves experience a role reversal. Many modern scholars like to explain that many stories in the Torah are about later writers looking back and trying to answer the question, how did we get to the place that we're in today? And Ephraim, although small here, as you can see, and this is one rendition, Ephraim was considered one of the most powerful northern tribes, so much so that the northern land of Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, became known as Ephraim, not just Israel. So one way to look at this text is, well, how did that happen? How did the younger child, the small land here, how did Ephraim become the most prominent? And we, perhaps the mythic story behind that is that Jacob reversed the order of the children. Another way to look at this whole series of reversals in Genesis, and perhaps to apply that to Genesis as a whole, teaches us to always expect the unexpected. For a moment now, I'm leaving what I described. I think you can still read this chapter as a paradigmatic death experience, but I want to take a larger step back now and think about the book of Genesis as a whole. We have a constant reversal of fortune here and a constant theme of expect the unexpected. And that seems to reach a climax in the very last part of this Torah portion. And as we end the book of Genesis, I think we're being asked to think about, do we expect the expected or do we expect the unexpected? And how can we open ourselves up like our ancestors to bring the expected into our own lives? And when we pass on blessings to others, are we passing on blessings that allow others to follow the unknown and indeed expect the unexpected? Or are we perhaps passing on blessings where they become where we're applying what is expected? And in fact, in this week's Torah portion, the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh actually becomes the blessing that parents give their sons traditionally on Friday night. So as we think about blessing all those people in our lives that we want to bless, not just children, I hope we can take the message of the book of Exodus and always, for ourselves and for others, encourage each other to expect the unexpected, to transform the expected into the unexpected as our ancestors did. So on that note, I do want to pause after a lot of talking on my part. I want to pause. I know there might be a lot of questions, and I would like to try and address at least 3 until about 11:15 on the text itself, on the themes of reversal of fortune, reversal of primogeniture, the older being favored, and expecting the unexpected. So let me pause there, and I'm really eager to hear some of your voices also. And I would like to invite people who haven't yet shared or asked questions. I see Robert, so I'll call on Robert. Robert, I'll go ahead and unmute. There you go.
I have 2 questions. One,
yes.
how was the Levites not given tribal status? Because there was no temple, there was no service, temple service, and so they were eliminated from tribal land because of their role in the temple.
Yeah, so one, I have two responses to that. One is that in the Torah, throughout the travels in the desert, there is a structure called the Mishkan. And in the Mishkan, the priests and the Levites, and the priests are from the Levite family, the Levites still served in that Mishkan, in that sanctuary or tabernacle.
I understand.
Okay. So I'm going to pause there and not even share another possibility. And you said you had two questions, so I want to give you the chance to ask the second one.
So Manasseh ended up with the largest piece of land.
Yeah.
So in effect, the eldest son did get the largest land.
Yeah, it's very interesting, except that Ephraim was, this land here is considered the more powerful area of the north. And so Bethel and Shiloh, for example, were major cities in the north. And it does seem like, and what we do know from the rest of Tanakh and from other texts, is that Ephraim, this area was the most powerful despite its size.
Abby, we have 3 hands raised. We have Aaron, Tanya, and Heidi.
Great. Thank you, Julie. So Aaron, would you like to go first?
Hi. My name is Erin. I'm from Memphis, Temple, Israel. And I have a creative writing degree. So the first thing I thought of was we were reading this section was the significance of the motions that that Jacob was using for the people who at the time would have been hearing or reading these things, that there would have been a cultural meaning and a meaning to them that for us, like you had to describe to us, okay, the right hand is the more godly hand, but they would have known this inherently. And so it's a way for the meaning of the stories to be told without going into really long and complicated explanations. And then the other thing that I was looking at was ultimogeniture is like the name of last-born rights, like that the last-born gets it. I looked it up because I was like, this has to have a name. And apparently, like, it was really common, mostly because elder children were more likely to be able to establish themselves, have some mobility, obtain their own land. But I just thought that was really interesting. I don't really have a question, just a few.
Thank you for those reflections.
Fun points.
Yes. Thank you for adding those. I heard you mention the succinctness of the Hebrew Bible, and scholars often talk about that, how the language is very succinct. Aaron, I was looking at you, but I don't know where you went. And also, it's very interesting. One thing I did not mention is that one theory on this reversal of primogeniture, and Aaron, thank you again for bringing in that other term, it was unfamiliar to me, is that Israel, our ancestors, saw themselves and in fact were the weaker of all the surrounding ancient Near Eastern powers. The Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, they saw themselves, our ancestors saw themselves as the weaker and the younger. And by writing into our ancient stories this reversal where the younger, the weaker, is able to triumph over the stronger, that is a way, that is wishful thinking and a way for our ancestors to express a sense of optimism or hopefulness, or no, or almost perhaps an indignance. No, we too are valid, even though we're not as powerful and strong as these powers that surround us and that sometimes rule over us. Heidi, you had your hands up too.
Hi. When I read this parsha, what crosses my mind are questions about premonition, divine inspiration, and how Jacob, is portrayed here. And both Joseph and Jacob have a history of prophetic dreams, or dreams that make them take some actions. And none of that is in this parsha. And I'm kind of wondering, is there anything been written or thought about as to whether there is more to Jacob's actions and thoughts at this point than what's been actually written? I mean, does he have a sense, if there was going to be a midrash, did he have a sense that, you know, the Israelites were going to have to leave and get organized and have, you know, tribal leaders?
That's a really interesting question. From what I know, no, he did not have that sense, and none of the forefathers did. The forefathers were promised, the story goes that the forefathers were promised that their descendants would be slaves in Egypt, they would be freed, and then they would inherit the land. And furthermore, specifically in the book of Deuteronomy, but also in other places, the description of what they need to do in order to stay in the land is described. They must keep the mitzvot. They are in a covenant with God. God has chosen them, and they have to hold up their ends of the bargain by observing the laws described, and that way they can continue to remain in the land. If they do not, they will be kicked out of the land. There are some theories on those texts themselves, but that is what the forefathers were promised. The tribes themselves, the sons are mentioned as sons, not as tribes, I believe. I would want to go back and double check, but I think what you're asking is, were they given more specific information about the actual tribal origin of what
these
seems
are
like to be
both Joseph and Jacob had some very profound experiences through dreams. Yeah. And after they'd have a dream, it would either be prophetic or, you know, Jacob would do something, you know. There's like none of this here. And yet, like, you know what I mean?
I think so. I mean, the only thing that I can say, and then I want to move on to Tanya, who's been waiting so patiently. And the only thing that I can say is that there is a distinction between the stories that we have and some historical information that we know. And the forefathers were not, one of the things that seems to be the case is that there may not have been exactly this tribal confederation that we know about, but it does seem like Israel, and you'll get different opinions from different people, but it does certainly seem to me that Israel started, our origins, our ancestors began in some kind of tribal confederation before there was a monarchy. Forefathers were not told anything about that, despite the divine connections that are described in the book of Genesis. They don't get every detail. So Heidi, I hope that's helpful a little bit, and I'm going to shift gears to Tanya. I know there's lots of other questions. If Julie allows, I can stay on for a little bit, but Tanya, I'll jump to you. Julie mentioned you earlier, and I've seen you waiting patiently.
Hi, Ms. Eisenberg, I'd just like to make two observations. I think Jacob did two very legal and binding things on his deathbed. I don't know if people wrote wills back in those days, but you know how we have wills now. Well, the first thing that was interesting to me, how he made Joseph swear to take him out of Egypt, to bury him. And so when Joseph had to go ask permission of Pharaoh, I had read some commentators say that he was able to tell Pharaoh, I swore to my father. And that was like Jacob was plowing the field. He knew that he needed to give Joseph a good reason to be allowed to leave Egypt. And then the other thing, the adoption. I've often wondered about the adoption of Ephraim and Manasseh. And I know there were many motivations for this, but could one of them have possibly been because their mother was not an Israelite woman, but because she was an Egyptian woman?
Oh, Tanya, thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great point. Yes, yeah, that's a great point that is often included in interpretations and commentaries on this section. That in fact, by adopting Ephraim and Manasseh, Jacob, and I'm going to use this word again, supplanted Joseph's wife, Egyptian wife Osnat, with Rachel, the woman who he married, who was Canaanite in his clan, or an ancient Hebrew. So Tanya, that's a great point to bring in. Thank you so much. What I'd like to do right now is, if you have to go, since it is 11:15, I want to thank you for coming. I did put my email, I believe, in the slides. If you didn't, and I have not seen the chat, even though I see that there are 55 comments there. So if you would like to email me, just give me some time to get back to you next week. But this is my email. You're welcome to email me and I can correspond with you a bit. And if people do want to stay on, I can stay on till 11:25 and answer some additional questions and call on some others. So I'm staying on till 11:25. For those of you who have to go, feel free, and I will look for some other raised hands in the meantime.
Thank you so much, Abby, and Shabbat Shalom to anyone who needs to run, and thank you so much also for staying on a few extra minutes. We have a question from Dobby. Go ahead, unmute.
I'm all ears.
Actually, it's not a question, but a comment or observation. The upsetting of the primogeniture and the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh, which we use to today, I could see it as more of a recognition of the individual abilities and traits of each of our children. And to me, when I'm giving the traditional blessing, I feel it's more saying to the children, you are you, and you can be yourself.
I love it, Dobby. That's beautiful. That's just an incredible way to, that's an incredible reflection toward the end of our session. I love that. I think that's a beautiful interpretation, almost taking this reversal of primogeniture to the next level, that there's always room, we can always make room for the unexpected set of characteristics and the shining of others too. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other comments or questions?
Julie, I see Esther, who I know has been eagerly waiting to share again.
Okay, I can't, because I go by the virtual hand, so I can't.
Okay, so Esther, yes, I know, thank you for your patience while we let other voices get into our space today.
First of all, you talked about Shaddai, and we do have Shaddai on the mezuzah. And if you take the words from Shaddai, it's Shomer Dlatot Israel, the keeper of the doors of Israel. Mm-hmm. But what I find very interesting in the parasha is that twice, in two different words, Jacob tells his sons to gather. He says asfu, and he said it yetzvu. And to me, it means you have to be united. If you take the word unite, in the same letter, it'd be untie. And so how important it is that you are united in order to achieve whatever it is.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And when thing united also reminds me, in Israel, you see a lot of Hamsa.
Uh-huh.
Hamsa is when the fingers are together.
Yeah.
You are united. So the importance of being united is very strong. And then the blessing, to me, a blessing is more a direction.
Yes, yeah. Yes, I think that's a blessing. Blessings are fascinating things. It's a pretty fascinating thing that traditionally we bless God every day. That's more of an acknowledgement. But when we bless others, we seem to be offering them a hope for their future, different kinds of blessings for the same word. So Esther, thank you. The one thing I will challenge you on a little bit is that, you know, the tribes, the sons are far from united. And you astutely noticed, yet, I'm focused on chapter 48, but when we get into chapter 49, Parak Memtet, it's real, we see a different, it's not as beautiful and peaceful at all. So, I'll challenge that notion a little bit, but I think you can, and I've talked about this on My Jewish Learning before, that when we read text together, I always like to say, we're reading either with a pshat perspective, which is a Hebrew word that is often translated as a simple meaning. I like to quote one of my teachers, Malka Strasberg, who taught me to translate pshat as contextual, whether that's historically contextual, literarily contextual, really reading out from the text, or we're reading into the text, which our ancestors have been doing for thousands of generations, and I'm all for that. And I think, frankly, I think you can read almost anything into the text, truly. But you have to acknowledge that that's what you're doing. And that's very important to me as a learner and as a teacher. That I'm suggesting, Esther, you're talking, but I can't hear you for 1 second. But we can't hear you for 1 second. But let me finish my thought first. That we can read out from the text that clearly the brothers were not united, but it is possible to also read into the text a hope for a united family, especially based on that word of gathering that Esther's pointing out. So I think I think it's good to always raise our awareness of the kind of reading that we're doing.